Hello students, in this video lesson I'm going to be introducing you to the first of several different interest formulas, and I call this interest formula number 1. And what's going to happen is you're going to deposit money into a bank account, and the money that you deposit is known as letter P. So letter P stands for the principal or the money invested. You're going to be given an interest rate, letter R. They're going to tell you how long the investment takes place, so T is going to be the time in years. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to determine the balance, how much money is in the bank account after the time has gone by. So this up here is interest formula number 1. A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N, close parentheses, raised to the N times T power. So these are going to be money questions that we're going to be dealing with. And what's going to happen in these questions is they're going to tell you how many times per year your bank account gets interest. So I want you to have this interest formula on your video lesson. I want you to write out what all the different values represent. And now I want to talk a little bit about letter N, how many times per year the bank account gains interest. In these questions, you're going to be given one of these adverbs. And the adverb, the word that ends in an ly, tells you what your N value is going to be. So for example, if your bank account gains interest yearly, that would tell you that in the interest formula, your N is going to be 1, representing yearly. If your bank account gains interest semi-annually, if something happens semi-annually, it happens 2 times a year. So if the question mentions that the bank account gains interest semi-annually, your N is going to be 2. If your bank account gains interest quarterly, then your N is going to be 4. If the problem says interest is earned monthly, then your N is going to be 12. And if the problem says the bank account gains interest weekly, then your N is going to be 52, because N represents the number of times per year the bank account gains interest. So these are going to be key words that you want to have memorized to answer these questions. Now, what are these interest questions going to look like? Well, here's the first of 3 that I want you to work on in this video lesson. $2,000 is invested in an account for 5 years, compounded quarterly at 9%. What is the balance at the end of the 5 years? Well, these questions are always going to start off with a certain amount of money that's invested. That's going to be the principal. So here it says $2,000 is invested. So the P value in the formula is going to be 2,000. It mentions the interest rate R is 9%. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to convert the interest rate into a decimal. Right now, it's 9.0%, 9.0. To convert a percent into a decimal, you're going to go 2 places to the left. So in this case, when I move the decimal point 2 places to the left, the R value is going to be 0.09. So the interest rate is 0.09. The time in years, well, the question mentions the money is going to be invested for 5 years, so your time is going to be 5. And how many times per year is this account gaining interest? Well, here's the key word, quarterly. Your bank account is gaining interest quarterly. That means 4 times a year it's going to be gaining interest. So here your N value is going to be 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug into this interest formula and see what is the balance. See how much money is going to be in the account after 5 years. So we're going to have A, which represents the balance. That equals the principal, which is $2,000, parentheses, 1 plus, well, letter R we said was 0.09. So it's going to be 1 plus 0.09 divided by n. Well, in our problem, n was 4 because the balance is compounded quarterly. So it's going to be 1 plus 0.09 over 4, close parentheses, raised to the n times t power. Well, we just said n was 4, and t, the time in years, was 5. So in order to evaluate the balance, how much money is going to be in the account after 5 years, we're going to have to evaluate this expression. And the nice thing about these questions is that you can type them directly into your calculator. So here we're going to enter this expression into our calculator. A couple of things to point out. You understand this means 2,000 times. The nice thing is you can just simply type in 2,000 and then the open parentheses. The r over n, the 0.09 over 4, is a fraction. So you want to use the alpha y equals template to type in the fraction. You have to close the parentheses and then raise 4 times 5. That 4 times 5 is the exponent of the parentheses. So you want to close the parentheses after you type in 0.09 over 4, close the parentheses, and then exponent 4 times 5. You know 4 times 5 is 20, but you can kind of keep it just as 4 times 5. And when you press enter, the balance in this question turns out to be a little over $3,000. Now, when you're dealing with money, you're always going to round to 2 decimal places for dollars and cents. So here we're going to have $3,121. And to 2 decimal places, we look at the third number, which is 8. That's going to kick that 1 up to 2. So here the balance turns out to be $3,121.02. So you deposit $2,000 in the bank. After 5 years, your $2,000 is now up to $3,121.02. So that's how we use interest formula number 1. Determine the final account balance of an investment if $300 is invested in an account, an interest rate of 6.75% compounded semi-annually for 20 years. So the first thing you want to do is you want to write out the formula. A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N, close parentheses, raised to the N times T power. Make sure you know that N times T is in the exponent spot of the formula. And now when you go through your problem, first you determine the principal, the money invested. And in this case, it says the investment is going to be $300. So our P value is going to be $300. The interest rate R, well, here the interest rate is 6.75%. We're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So this is going to turn into 0.0675. So to convert from percent to decimal, you always move the decimal point 2 places to the left. T is the time in years. So in this case, it says the investment is for 20 years. And now N is going to be that adverb that we're going to look for in the problem. In this case, it says N is semi-annually. So to the notes that you copied down, semi-annually means N is going to be 2. So we're going to substitute back into the formula with all those values. A is the balance, so that's what we're trying to find right now. That equals P, the principal, so that's going to be 300 times parentheses 1 plus R over N. Well, in this case, R is 0.0675. N for semi-annually is 2. Close parentheses raised to the N times T, which in this case is 2 times 20th power. Now again, I know that 2 times 20 is 40, but I'm just going to have my calculator simplify this entire expression. You're going to type this into your calculator exactly as you see it. You're going to take a picture of your calculator and include it on the assignment. And let's see what the balance is going to be. So here's what your calculator should give you as the balance. Here's a picture of my calculator. I want you to take a picture of yours. Mine is highlighted in green, so yours shouldn't be. And remember, for these money questions, we're always going to go to 2 decimal places. So we're going to look at the third decimal place, which is 8. That's bigger than 5, so that's going to kick this 2 up to 3. So here the balance is going to be $1,131.73. The key is to have the formula memorized, know what each of the values represents, and substitute in accordingly to our formula. Next, we're going to determine the amount of interest earned. Now, interest is not a value in the formula, but I'll show you how we're going to go about calculating that. But it's still a money question where you're depositing an investment. So here it says you're depositing $2,500 into an account, 5.25% interest compounded monthly for 4 years. So I'm going to write out the formula first. A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N, close parentheses, raised to the N times T power. And my advice when you do these questions is to write out your variables, your P, your R, your N, and your T, and reread the question and substitute in accordingly. So in this case, you have $2,500 investment, so that's going to be your principal P. The interest rate R is 5.25%, and we're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left, so that's going to be 0.0525, so that's going to be our R value. The time in years, T, is going to be 4. And now for N, you always look for that adverb. You always look for that ly word. And in this case, here it says monthly. So according to our table, monthly means 12 times a year the account is gaining interest. So we're going to substitute all those values into our interest formula. We have the balance equals letter P, the principal, so that's $2,500, times 1 plus R over N, so 1 plus R, which is 0.0525, over N for monthly, 12, close parentheses, raised to the N times T, so in this case 12 times 4 power. So in order to figure out A, which represents the balance, we're going to enter this expression into our calculator and determine the amount of money that's in this bank account. Now, I know this is not what the question is asking. The question is asking how much in interest you earn. But let's first try to figure out A, the balance. Enter this expression into your calculator, take a picture of your work, and I'll show you what my calculator gave me as the answer. Now here's my work. I want a picture of your calculator with your work. Here the balance, if we go to 3 decimal places, this 2 is less than 5, so it's going to keep that 8 as is. So here our balance is $3,082.78. So that's what letter A, the balance, is. But the question says, determine the amount of interest. And here's what's going on in our problem. You deposited $2,500 in the bank. After 4 years, now the balance is $3,082.78. The interest is basically how much more money you have. How much more money? You deposited $2,500. You now have $3,082.78. So how much more money do you have? Well, if I take those two values, if I take the 3,082.78 and if I subtract the 2,500, that's how much more money you have. You have $582.78 more, right? Because you started with 2,500, you're now up to this 3,000 number. So this is how much more you have. That's how much interest you earned. Now I choose to think about these questions in terms of, okay, how much more money do you have? That's what the interest is. But if you want a formula for how you calculate the interest in a bank account equals the balance, how much money you have at the end of the time, minus the principal. The interest is equal to the balance minus the principal. That's what we did. We took the balance of that $3,082.78 and we subtracted how much we deposited, 2,500, and that's how we came up with the interest. So some questions will ask you, what is the balance? Others will ask you how much in interest. Finally, your parents deposit $1,500 in two different accounts. Account 1 pays 2.25% interest compounded weekly. Account 2 pays 2.3% interest compounded monthly. We have to find the balance of each account after 5 years. We have to determine which account has the higher balance and how much more money is in that account when compared to the other. So this one is really two separate questions. We're going to have to first figure out how much money we have using account 1. Then we'll have to figure out how much money we have after account 2, and we'll see which one gives the higher balance. So first we'll do account 1, and account 1 says it pays 2.25% interest compounded weekly. So I'll write out my formula. A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N raised to the N times T power. I'm going to write out my variables P, R, N, and T. It says for both of these accounts, the principal is $1,500. So here our principal is $1,500. Account 1 pays 2.25% interest. So if we go 2 decimal places to the left, here the R for account 1 is 0.0225. It says how much is going to be in each of these accounts after 5 years. So our T value for both accounts is going to be 5. But now for account 1, here's the adverb. It says the interest is compounded weekly. So since you gain interest weekly in this 52 weeks in a year, here our N value is going to be 52. So let's substitute into this interest formula with account 1's information. We have A as the balance. That equals the principal, which for both accounts is $1,500, times 1 plus R over N. So 1 plus 0.0225 over N, which is 52, close parentheses, raised to the N times T, which in this case is 52 times 5 power. So the first thing I want you to do is to take a calculator picture of account 1 and its balance. So here for account 1, the balance, if I go to the third decimal place, that's 7. That's bigger than 5, so it's going to kick this 6 up to 7. So here the balance is $1,678.57. So that's what the balance is if account 1 is used. Now let's figure out the balance for account 2. I'll write out the interest formula. A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N, close parentheses, raised to the n times t power. I'll write out my variables, p, r, n, and t. Remember, the principal for both accounts is $1,500. Here it says for account 2 pays 2.3% interest. So if I move the decimal point 2 places to the left, that's going to be 0.023. So that's our rate. The time for both questions, they said, was 5 years. But now for account 2, it said the interest is compounded monthly. So here our n value is going to be 12. So we're going to substitute back into our formula. We have the balance A. That equals the principal, which is 1,500, times 1 plus r over n. So it's going to be 1 plus 0.023 over 12, close parentheses, raised to the n times t, which in this case is 12 times 5 power. Take a minute, type this expression into your calculator, and determine the balance if you use account number 2. Here the third decimal place is 4, so that's going to keep this value as is. So here the balance is $1,682.62. So account 1, we have our balance. Account 2, we have our balance. And now what we need to try to figure out is which account had the higher balance. Well, it looks like the answer to that is going to be account 2, because account 2 has 1682.62. Account 1 only had 1678.57. So which account had the higher balance? The answer to that would be account 2. But now the question says, how much more money is in that account when compared to the other? So here what we can do to figure out how much more money is in that account is we can just simply subtract the two values. Take the higher account 2, the 1682.62, subtract account 1, the 1678.57, and that's going to be the difference in these two accounts. And here's our answer, $4.05.